All right, good morning again. You know what they say, long scripture reading, long sermon. Good try though. Hopefully it won't be that long. But I did joke with at the beginning of last service that Ariel got like one of the hardest passages in the Bible, and I'm hoping I got one of the easiest ones in the Bible. So let's see how this goes. But many of you know the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts as an organization. Their motto, be prepared. That's the Boy Scouts' motto. And it was written by a guy named Robert Baden-Powell in 1907. He wrote like a little book to found the Scouts. And he came up with this. He was an English soldier, and he started the Boy Scouts. And when he presented this motto, always being prepared, he published it first in 1908. And he wrote that to be prepared means you are always in a state of readiness in mind and body to do your duty. And of course, someone at one point asked him, well, what do you mean by this? And asked him to clarify more. Like, be prepared for what? He answered, why, for any old thing. So this guy, he founds the Boy Scouts, and as you know, the Boy Scouts, their organization, trains people in a lot of outdoor skills, a lot of practical things, from canoeing to starting a fire to tying knots to you name it. Survival skills that help you survive in case you ever need to outdoors. Basic life skills, which most of us actually don't have these days. And so if you know anything about the prepper movement, many of you have probably heard of this, or at least know people who do this and stockpile everything from food to guns to fuel, you name it, for the reason that they want to be prepared in case there are problems. So of course, everyone knows from like a basic financial best practice standpoint, most financial advisors would advise that everyone have something like an emergency fund of money that's just set aside that you don't touch. That way, if an emergency comes up, an unexpected expense, some health issue, if you lose your job or something, you have some amount of money to fall back on to be prepared in time of emergency. But what many of us don't think about is if for some reason transportation in this country stopped and we did not receive food at the grocery stores, they'd be empty in a matter of days. Some people predict that if there was some major EMP strike or a massive solar flare from the sun, which we have seen historically, and it wiped out the grid in the United States, then like 90% of the population would probably die within a year or two, because we're so dependent on technology and everything. And so in that sense, I think the preppers are onto something. It's probably a good idea to have a little bit of extra food in your house and a few ways to take care of yourself. It is wise to be prepared physically. But what Jesus wants us to know here is that it's even more wise, infinitely more wise. It's of an eternal value to be prepared spiritually. It's so much more important, and the consequences are much greater than just physical life and death. Being prepared. So if you remember the passage last week, Ariel went through, it was Jesus answering a series of questions that were posed to him on the Mount of Olives. People call this the Olivet Discourse, or the Sermon on the Mount of Olives. And he was asked, can you tell us when these things will be? Because he was predicting the destruction of the temple. And then they also asked him two other, maybe unrelated questions that they didn't know in their mind were unrelated. When will these things be? What will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? And so Jesus gave a quite confusing answer where he melded the answer to those three questions all into one kind of stream of consciousness answer. And he gave them these predictions, and he gave them these signs that were pretty common signs that wouldn't actually be very indicative to anyone of when he was actually going to come again. And now, he tells his disciples, the real point of all of this is that you should be prepared. You need to be prepared for his return and for eternity at any moment. So the main idea here is that no one knows when Jesus will return, so we should be prepared by faithfully, productively serving our King. No one knows when Jesus will return, so prepare by being faithful and productive for the King. So I'm going to start, and I'll read the first section here. And I'm going to break this sermon up into like about 5 or 6 parts, but 3 main parts, really. The first one is the principle of preparation that he gives us at the very beginning. The next, we'll see a few parables on preparation. And then finally, we have a big parable on productive preparation. So the principle of preparation, parables of preparation, and then productive preparation. So starting in verse 36, I'll read 36 to 42, which is the principle of preparation. Jesus says, "But concerning that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, but the Father only. For as were the days of Noah, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. For as in those days before the flood they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day when Noah entered the ark. And they were unaware until the flood came and swept them all away. So will be the coming of the Son of Man. Then 2 men will be in the field. One will be taken and one left. 2 women will be grinding at the mill. One will be taken and one left. Therefore, stay awake, for you do not know on what day your Lord is coming." So that's the principle of preparation. Jesus' point here couldn't be clearer. Nobody knows when he's going to come back. No one knows. Not the angels in heaven, not even the Son. And that's a controversial statement. That's a confusing statement for many of us. But I think the basic gist of what he's saying here is that Jesus, in his incarnate form, we're told elsewhere in the New Testament, he set aside some of his eternal attributes, his omnipresence. He wasn't everywhere at all time. He controlled the amount of power that he would use, and even in his incarnation, he was not omniscient. He didn't know everything. In his state as a human, he didn't know everything, and at the time did not have all of the details of when exactly he was going to come back. So he's, in a sense, almost telling his disciples here, when they ask, "When are you going to come back?" Well, the Son doesn't know exactly when he's going to come back. I don't know right now exactly when I'm coming back, as the incarnate Son of God. He had humbled himself, we're told, when he became a man. He humbled himself and voluntarily gave away some of his knowledge as a human interacting with his disciples. But the other thing that he tells us here is that what it will be like is like the days of Noah, when nobody thought anything of anything. Like, people heard that Noah was preaching, but nobody was really paying attention. They went on with life as normal. They were doing their businesses just like normal. They were marrying. They were giving in marriage. People were going on with life. They thought everything was going to be fine. They were taking a long-term view, and they were really not expecting the end to come. And then they were all taken away, washed away. The instant that Noah went in there, shut the door, and the rains came down, that was when they were surprised. That was when they knew. So all of the signs that Jesus had just given prior to this, as we saw, were pretty common signs. They were pretty normal. Wars, earthquakes, famines, natural disasters. As Ariel pointed out last week, those happen right now. Those are happening right now. Those have been happening for all of human history. Entire civilizations have been wiped out by disease, have been wiped out by flood. And so, Jesus is saying those are the kinds of things that will happen before I come. And nobody knows when it's going to be. In fact, it's going to be so unclear that you will have people in the same family who will be going about their lives every day, just like normal. 2 men working side by side in a field. Likely a father, son, 2 brothers, family, people who knew each other very well will be working together in a field. 2 women will be walking around pushing the grinder when the end comes, and nobody knows. They won't be expecting it. They'll be working. The prepared people and the unprepared people. The ones who are ready for his coming and those who aren't will all be doing the exact same thing when the Son of Man comes again. And that's really the point. Some people look at this passage about the people taken, and they try to speculate about like a rapture, pre-tribulation rapture, post-tribulation rapture. The passage is actually unclear who's taken. If you look at all the rest of the passages around here, the ones taken are the ones that are taken in judgment, like the people who were washed away in the flood, the people who were taken out and thrown with the hypocrites and weeping and gnashing of teeth. And in Mark's gospel, it seems pretty clear that the ones taken are the ones who are being taken in punishment. With that said, I don't think that's Jesus' point. The point is that there will be a decisive moment when people will be separated. And we're going to read about that next week. And up until that point, no one will expect the end. So I don't believe personally in a pre-tribulation rapture, and I don't think this text or any other text in the Bible actually teaches a pre-tribulation rapture, but I do think that God will be taking people and doing stuff with them when the Son of Man comes again. And what's funny about this is, although Jesus gives us very, very clear instructions here about the end times and the fact that no one knows, you still have these interesting false prophets who constantly try to predict when the end of the world will be. I remember learning about this guy. There's a guy named Edgar C. Wisenant who wrote a book called 88 Reasons Why the Rapture Will Happen in 1988. In case you're not clear on that, he was wrong. Didn't happen. And he realized he was wrong too. Like 88 came and went, and he realized it. But I mean, he's got to keep making money selling books. So he wrote another one the next year called The Final Shout, Rapture Report, 1989. Rapture didn't happen in 1989 either. And then he wrote 23 Reasons Why a Pre-Tribulation Rapture Looks Like It Will Occur on Rosh Hashanah in 1993. It's 2023, and it did not happen. And then he also wrote another one that said, and now the earth's destruction by fire, nuclear bomb fire, predicting the end of the world in 1994. And again, we look back and we say, this is silly, but I mean, all you have to do is go on YouTube, and like there are 1,000 people. I have people who send me videos of people predicting, like, it's going to be in 10 years. This is the next 10 years. They're not necessarily Christians. I think maybe the guy's Catholic, but there's a rock band I used to listen to, and one of their lyrics, they have a song. They're actually a good Chicago band called Wilco, and one of their lyrics said, "Come on, children, you're acting like children. Every generation thinks it's the end of the world. Every generation thinks it's the last and thinks it's the end of the world." And then at the end of the chorus, he says, "You never know." What's sad is that this non-Christian rock star knew more about the Bible than this Wisenant guy who predicted the end of the world 4 times and literally struck out every time. We do not know when the end is going to be here. So Jesus tells us, rather than wasting time trying to predict the end, he says, be ready for the end. Stay awake. Be prepared. He summarizes at the very end of this, and this is kind of the point of the whole thing. Nobody knows at the beginning of verse 36, and then in verse 42 he says, therefore stay awake, for you do not know on what day your Lord is coming. That's the point. He could come at any time. And now we're going to look at some parables on preparation. So that's the principle. You don't know, be prepared. Here's some parables that will give us a little bit more detail on that preparation. So I'm going to read, this whole section is from 24:43 through 25:13. I'm going to go from the thief through the virgins in this section. So starting in verse 43 and 44, we get the shortest parable probably ever. He says, but know this, that if the master of the house had known in what part of the night the thief was coming, he would not, or he would have stayed awake and would not have let his house be broken into. Therefore, you must also be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect. So Jesus tells a series of parables here now to illustrate this idea of preparedness. And if you notice, he goes from almost like a one-verse parable all the way through the talents parable here. They grow in length as he goes, they grow in details, and each one of them builds on the other ones to give us a little bit more of a nuanced position and to broaden out our idea of what preparedness for Jesus' return looks like. So here, the first one, the parable of the thief, the basic idea is be prepared so that you're not surprised. Be prepared so that you're not surprised. And he says here of the thief, this shortest and least complex. He basically said, if someone knows when a thief is going to come, break into their house, back then, potentially kill their family, steal their stuff, they wouldn't just go to bed at night. If they knew that was going to happen, they wouldn't just let themselves be assaulted and have all their stuff stolen. In fact, of course, the person would be awake. They'd be ready. Maybe they would have called their friends. They probably would have armed themselves with weapons, maybe set up traps, booby traps all over the place. It helps to be prepared when something like this is going to happen. I mean, we've all learned the valuable lessons from the movies Home Alone, right? If you are well prepared, it really only takes one little kid to stop a bunch of thieves from breaking into a house or a store. Or I never even saw the third one. I don't know what they were trying to break into that time. But either way, the wisdom of Home Alone is the wisdom of Jesus here. If you know when the thief's coming, it's not that hard to stop him. And this reminds me, when I was in high school, I had one of my greatest possessions. For all of you younger people, there was a time when we didn't have iPhones or like MP3 players that had all of our music on it. And I actually had to spend like hundreds of dollars on CDs because I was like a huge music fan. And I bought them, and there were these cases that you could put your CDs in, like a binder. And I had all of my favorite albums in there. And I would take it with me so I could, listen to one of my, 80 albums or whatever that I had in there, and I would throw it in. Lots of money, probably $10 per CD. And I left it in my car. I don't know exactly where it was, but it was probably on the passenger seat in my car, and I was parked at my friend's house. And it was kind of a suburban-y neighborhood outside of Kalamazoo, very safe. I didn't think anything of it. There's probably no thieves around here. And I don't know, I probably left the car unlocked, or maybe the window was like partway down. I don't remember the details. But if I would have known that someone was going to walk by and steal all of my CDs, that was so traumatizing to me. That was literally one of my most prized possessions, and hundreds of dollars, and I was cheap. I literally would consider for a long time whether or not to spend $10 to buy an album. So I was super cheap, and they all got stolen. If I would have known, I would have put the car somewhere else, probably parked it in their driveway rather than on the street. I would have hidden them, shoved them under the seat or in the glove compartment. I would have probably locked the door and rolled the windows up. I would have been prepared, but I wasn't. Jesus is coming again. And he's saying, be prepared for that. Don't be surprised. I'm telling you in advance, I'm coming. Be ready. That's the quick one, the thief. Next, we've got the slave, verses 45 through 51. Who then is the faithful and wise servant whom his master has set over his household to give them their food at the proper time? Blessed is that servant whom his master will find so doing when he comes. Truly I say to you, he will set him over all his possessions. But if that wicked servant says to himself, my master is delayed, and begins to beat his fellow servants, and eats and drinks with drunkards, the master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, and at an hour he does not know, and will cut him in pieces, and put him with the hypocrites. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. I call this the slave because translations don't like the word slave in modern English because it has connotations of transatlantic kind of ethnicity-based slavery. But back then, it was quite common. Huge portions of the population would have been slaves. They didn't have a bankruptcy court like we do nowadays, where you can just get out of debt if you've lost something or had to borrow. So people would often sell themselves into slavery just to continue to live and have someone to provide for them and to help pay off their debt. That was the reality of their world. Jesus isn't necessarily endorsing or condemning it here. He's just using the reality that they would have all experienced. And here you have a slave who works for a master and has been given a specific job to do. I'm going away, take care of everyone, feed everyone, manage the household, make sure everything's working fine. And notice here that I said the slave. It's not the slaves. Jesus actually does this as a singular this time because he's showing that you can be, any one of us could be either one of, like this slave could go either way. He could listen to his master and do the right thing and feed everyone, take care of everyone, do a good job, manage the kitchen, manage the household, pay everyone and feed everyone at the proper time. And when the master comes back, he's going to say, good job. You did a good job. And then he's going to give him a bigger job with probably better compensation and more responsibility. That's the good slave. Jesus calls him faithful and wise. You did a good job. You took care of others. You managed the household, and because of that, you're getting more responsibility, and you're probably going to get more possessions. Well done. Yeah, the other thing that he could do, though, is that slave could think, man, my master is gone. No one's looking. And I don't know if you guys, I work remotely, and I know many people who work remotely are tempted to think, my boss isn't looking right now, but I'm going to get paid anyway. And this guy thinks that the master's going to be gone for a long time. I'm sure he's going to be gone for probably weeks. So I'll just mess around. I don't need to really do anything. In fact, I'm in charge, and they have to listen to me. So he starts beating and strangling and mistreating the other people. He treats them poorly. He doesn't work. And then he just eats all the food himself. He's not distributing it like he's supposed to. And then he gets drunk, and he's hanging out with drunkards. And when the master comes back, quicker than he expected, he's going to be caught off guard. He's going to be in trouble. Big trouble. Throwing him to that place where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. I mean, 51 is intense. He says he will cut him in pieces. Chop him up. With a sword or something, I guess. Jesus is using very evocative images here. Violent, angry, horrible repercussions are going to be coming on this person. And the principle here is that we have to be prepared to give an account because Jesus might come back sooner than you think, and you will be judged. So if you're not a Christian today, or if you are professing to be a Christian, but you're not actually following and obeying Jesus, he might come back sooner than you think. He could return today, tomorrow. The other thing is you're going to meet Jesus, and it might be sooner than you think when you die. So that's the other idea here. It doesn't have to be just predictions of the end times. Any one of us could get in a car accident, could fall down the stairs, could have an aneurysm, have a heart attack. Any other unexpected health event could mean that we meet Jesus sooner than we expect. Are you prepared to give an account? All right, now we'll look at the virgins, verses 1 through 13. It says, "Then the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish and 5 were wise. For when the foolish took their lamps, they took no oil with them. But the wise took flasks of oil with their lamps. As the bridegroom was delayed, they all became drowsy and slept. But at midnight there was a cry, 'Here's the bridegroom! Come out to meet him!' Then all those virgins rose and trimmed their lamps, and the foolish said to the wise, 'Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out.' But the wise answered, saying, 'Since there is not enough for us and for you, rather go to the dealers and buy for yourselves.' And while they were going to buy, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went in with him to the marriage feast, and the door shut. Afterward, other virgins came, also saying, 'Lord, Lord, open to us.' And he answered, 'Truly I say to you, I do not know you. Watch therefore, for you do not know neither the day nor the hour.'" The virgins. The 10 virgins. Now, we think of the word virgins, and it has a connotation in our day, like someone who hasn't had sex before, right? That's not really the point here. The point is that these are young women who are likely friends, associates, close to the bride. They're kind of like the equivalent of bridesmaids, but not the same. Their wedding situation was different than ours. So this is kind of actually confusing. This was the one I really wanted to make sure I studied going into this sermon, because I've always been sort of confused by this one. So if you are too, we're in this together. So the virgins, basically, what Jesus is saying here is he's laying out the scenario of what all of them would have understood as a very normal first century Jewish wedding situation. The festivities in the way that the ceremonies worked would be often that there would be a smaller ceremony that was maybe just the family only, where they would maybe crank out the details of the dowry and then also kind of go through and make the vows and potentially the consummation or whatever, and some other things like that could all happen at the bride's house. And then what they would do is that the reason they would normally wait till the groom was older, because the groom's responsibility was then to throw a massive party that would last for days for all their friends and relatives. It's really expensive, and so he had to save a lot of money up for this party. And so while they would do the first part of the wedding ceremony at the bride's house, then they would have this big wedding procession, and everybody would have their lamps, and the lamps were kind of the indication that you were part of the wedding party. You were allowed in. It was your ticket into the big feast, festival, party thing that was going to happen over at the groom's house on the other side of town. And so what's happening here is that these women are friends, maybe like bridesmaids of this bride, and they're waiting for the stuff over there to be done, and then for the formalities to move on and them to get in the parade to head across town to the groom's house. And they needed these lamps as kind of their ticket to get into the party, to show that they weren't just like party crashers who were in for some free food or something at the party. And so there were the wise ones who prepared. And the idea of this one is that we need to be prepared for a delay. Jesus might come later than we expect. He goes through this, he explains all of this stuff, and then he says, but wait, there's a difference. There were wise and there were foolish. The wise were prepared for a delay. They had brought extra supplies, whereas the foolish thought this was going to be quick and easy. Wait it out, and we'll be in. And notice it took longer and longer. We don't know why. He doesn't tell us why, what was going on. But they all fall asleep. Again, which is fine, because there's wise people who sleep, and there are foolish people who sleep. And then in the middle of the night, right at midnight, the cry comes out, all right, everything's taken, we're going to the groom's house. And when they wake up, they look, and they're like, oh no. And the lamps, they could have been like torches, literally like a torch that you pour oil on to kind of keep it wet and give it more fuel to burn so that the rags don't just burn up and go out. Or it could have been like a little lamp with a wick that they would trim and fill the lamp up and keep it burning that way. But the point is that either way, whichever one it was, you needed the oil to keep the thing burning a lot longer than it would on its own. And so they ran out. They didn't have any. And then they looked over at the other ones and said, please give us some of yours, so we can all get into the party together. They were like, no, it was a long time. The oil is basically running out on us too, but we've got a little bit left, and we're gonna make it to the party. Go, yeah, it's in the middle of the night, but you can probably go find a vendor, bang on his door really hard, get him to wake up and sell you some stuff, and you'll be fine too. We'll all get in. So they go off, and they try to, and they missed their opportunity. The parade comes through, they get in line, they go in, and the door is shut while the other ones are off, trying to prepare. And I think one of the things that's important to note here is that personal preparation is not transferable. I think that's the point of Jesus' story here, is that the people who were prepared can't transfer that preparedness on to anyone else. So if you make some sort of profession of faith, and you think, I'm from a good Christian family, I know people who are saved, I attend church fairly regularly. If you're not really prepared, other people's preparedness doesn't rub off on you. Everyone individually has to be prepared, and it could be longer than you think. And even in the early church, people were saying, why is it taking so long for Jesus to come back? Even in the New Testament, in 1 Peter, people were saying, why hasn't he come back yet? Little did they know it was going to be 2,000 years. But the Bible tells us very clearly, Peter says, don't overlook this one fact that with the Lord, one day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is as one day. The Lord isn't slow to fulfill his promises, as some count slowness, but is patient toward you, not wishing that any should perish, but that all should reach repentance. So we all need to be prepared. And what we find out here is that if you're not prepared, Jesus will say, I never knew you. And this is very similar language to what he said in the Sermon on the Mount in chapter 7. The people that didn't bear fruit, the false professors. Depart from me, you workers of lawlessness, for I never knew you. And they even shouted in the Sermon on the Mount, Lord, Lord, just like these little ladies did. Lord, Lord. The bridesmaids were not ready. Jesus says, it could take longer than you expect. You don't know the timing. You don't know when I'm coming. Be prepared. And then finally, we're on the last parable, the biggest, most complex of all of them, the parable of the talents. For it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted to them his property. To one he gave 5 talents, and to another 2, and to another 1, and each according to his ability. Then he went away. He who had received the 5 talents went at once and traded with them. He put them to work, and he made 5 talents more. So also he who had 2 talents made 2 talents more. But he who had received the 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. Now, after a long time, the master of those servants came, and he settled accounts with them. And he who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, and saying, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. Here, I have made 5 talents more. And his master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. And he also, who had 2 talents, came forward saying, Master, you delivered to me 2 talents, and here I have 2 talents more. And his master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. And he also had received the 1 talent, came forward saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid. And I went, and I hid your talent in the ground. Here, take back what's yours. But his master answered him, You wicked and slothful servant. You knew that I reap where I had not sown, and gather where I scattered no seed? Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and at my coming I should have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him who I gave it to, and give it to the one who has 10. For to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have an abundance. But to the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the worthless servant into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Here we have this parable of the talents, and this is the final parable that Jesus gives. And this parable is about preparation. But this parable is teaching us that Jesus expects productive preparation that actually improves his assets and advances his kingdom while he's gone. As I said before, each one of these was a slave as well. They were owned by the master. These weren't just workers. He owned them. They owed him whatever he asked. It was their job to do. They couldn't just quit and go off and do another job. They couldn't just decide that they were going to do something different. And the thing that's interesting here, so the talent is actually just a measurement of weight. It's not an actual monetary value. And so we don't really know how much money this was that he gave them. It could have been a talent of silver, which is pretty likely, or it could have been a talent of gold, which was more valuable. A talent's about 47 and a half pounds. So that's each one, 47 and a half pounds of silver or gold is a large amount of money. The point here is he gave them a ton of money. This master took his slaves and he gave them a ton of money, like the proverbial $1 million. Like he's like, each one of them, here's 5 million, here's 2 million, here's 1 million. Like, figure it out. And the understanding was that they were supposed to use this money to make more money. It wasn't just find a hole to dig it in and keep it until I come back. It was, you're given a responsibility here. They knew that because the first two immediately went to work. They knew what they were doing. When it says that they went to work, they put the money to work, they traded with it. What it means is they actually used that capital as capital and reinvested it to get more. They didn't have stock markets back then, so they couldn't just like throw it in the stock market and see if it grew. They actually would have to go and maybe acquire a business or start buying and selling goods and trading and basically starting or acquiring businesses and operating them, working very hard to take the capital they started with and make it more. And they did a good job. They got 100% return on investment on this money. I mean, we don't know how quick of a return that was, but that's pretty good. The master was gone, and he comes back. But we see that one of them didn't do anything. So the master gives the different amounts to the different people, and he gives the different amounts to the different people because they have different abilities, we're told. Some people have more responsibilities. Some people have more talent, more money, more resources, and some people have less. And that's not really the point of this. The point is that he gives to each one according to what they can handle, each one according to their abilities. It's not egalitarian. He doesn't give them the exact same thing across the board, but he gives them what he thinks they can handle. And they go and they engage and they double their investment. But then the one disobeys. He buries it in the ground. He doesn't do anything. He's not productive. He's completely unprepared. He doesn't want his master to get a return on his investment. And then we see in verse 19 that the master comes and he tries to settle accounts with the people. So he's gathering all the servants. We're told about these three. There's probably more. He's back in town and he's trying to figure out after a long time what happened while he was gone. So these guys come. And the first one comes. And the second one comes. And you can tell that they are proud of what they've done. They did a good job. They give the report. There's no excuses. There's not a lot of commentary. They just said, look, you gave me 5. I got 5 more. They're excited to present to their master the work they've done while he's gone. And notice that even though they were given different amounts and they produced different amounts of profit, they were both productive and they both got profit. They were both happy to present, and they got the exact same response from the master. Word for word, the exact same response. It didn't matter whether they made a larger quantity or a smaller quantity of growth. The fact that they were faithful is what mattered, and the fact that they actually were productive and did something, that's what mattered. And so because of that, they get the exact same response from the master. Well done, good and faithful servant. All he cared about was that productivity and that faithfulness. And then the relationship between the master and the slave seems to have changed a little bit. If you notice, he gives them this, and they're entrusted with it, but he says, enter into the joy of your master. There's a party here. He wants to have them, he's inviting them into ownership and into the joy of celebrating what they productively did. And notice the other thing that's interesting here is he says to both of them, you were faithful with a little thing, I'll give you a lot. And don't tell me, like, in what world is giving someone millions of dollars like little? So I think, again, Jesus is saying not everybody gets the same amount, but the same expectation of productivity is expected of everyone. But then the other thing that he wants us to see here is that crazy amounts of money in this life are not even worth being compared with the glory waiting for us on the other side of this when the master returns. The millions of dollars of capital it's a drop in the bucket. Like, I'm going to give you big stuff to manage. In eternity, we're told that we can't even imagine what it's going to look like. But if millions of dollars is nothing, the amount of resources, wealth, responsibilities, the kind of good jobs, the amount of joy that we'll have to do, like we're not just going to be sitting like naked on clouds playing the same song all day. That's not the Bible's presentation of what eternity is. It's good work to do. It's good things to happen in a world where there's not sorrow, where there's not brokenness, where there's not weeds that come up that force us to chew out a living like by the sweat of our brow. It will be good. It will be more. It will be better. And the sufferings in this life will not be comparable to the benefits of eternity if we're faithful and productive. But then notice in verse 24, the other guy comes, the third servant. And what does he say? He didn't do anything. In fact, he accuses the master here. I mean, you just listen to this guy. It's just insults and excuses. He says, "You're a hard man. I was afraid of you. I didn't do anything. Here it is. Take it back." Like the hatred of this servant for his master. He did not trust him. He did not love him, and he didn't want to produce anything useful for his master. He claims that it's out of fear, but the master even says, if you just were afraid, there were better options. There were secure investments. You could have just given it to a banker and at least gotten some sort of interest. Having that much capital, like there's no way that you couldn't just get some sort of stable investment. The master calls his bluff and he says, "You're lying. You are wicked and lazy. You hate me. You didn't want any kind of benefit, and because of that, you're not getting any benefit. You didn't do your job. You had one responsibility. You didn't have the option to opt out, and you did nothing. Wicked and lazy, slothful. You're not telling the truth. If you were, you would have just gone to the bank. You didn't do anything. In fact, it was the only thing worse he could have done was just thrown it in the ocean or lost it somehow. Because the master expected his servant to be productive and faithful. The unfaithful servant lied, hated his master, accused him of wrongdoing, said he was a dishonest, thieving businessman. And because of that, the master says, take what he's got away from him. Give it to somebody else. And I don't think the point is that the guy with 10, like for whatever, like who he gave it to doesn't matter. The point is that Jesus says there in verse 29, and again, this has always been confusing for me. He says, to anyone who has, more will be given, and he will have an abundance. But to the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. But the point in the context of this is, if you weren't productive at all and didn't create any value at all, then you're going to lose everything. Even the stuff that you had to start with, you lose. But the ones that are productive will be rewarded. Greater, farther, more, bigger than they could have imagined. And then, this worthless, wicked, evil, lazy, hateful servant is cast into the outer darkness, in that place where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth, the same place that the other slave was put at the end of verse 24. Taken away, punished, condemned to hell. And again, this is pretty intense. But Jesus' application here, productive preparation, is what he expects from all of his servants, all of his slaves. We don't own ourselves. We're not our own. We were bought with a price. If we are believers, he's bought us. We're his servants. And even if we're not believers, God made us. He owns us. He has the right to tell us everything. The question is, do you love Jesus? And as a result of the love for Jesus, do you want to see his investment in you grow? Are you using the talents, the skills, the time, the resources, the relationships, the money, any of your abilities, your family, your work? Are those used for him to increase his assets in the world to advance his kingdom? Do you say, I've been given something as a stewardship, it's not mine, I need to make the most productive use out of it I can in this life? Is that your attitude? Or do you hate him? Do you think this isn't right? I'm going to give him the bare minimum. I'm going to do whatever I can. I have excuses. I have plenty of excuses. Things have not gone well for me, and I don't want anything to do with Jesus' kingdom, advancing his kingdom. That's the question here. Because Jesus came to buy us. He actually came to die. He lived a perfect life. He died a substitutionary death so that all of our sins would be taken, to bring us into a relationship with him so that the relationship of just slave-master could be one of like brother and sister in the family of God. And then he rose again to defeat death and all of the punishment that we deserve, and he's giving us an opportunity to partner with him for the advancement of his kingdom and for the benefit, the growth of his assets, for the salvation of people all around the world. And the expectation is he owns you if you've trusted him. You are saved, but you are his. You are his slave. There's no chance. You don't just opt out. If you opt out, you're the wicked servant. Do you love Jesus or not? Are you going to be productive for him or not? Is your life his or not? Coming back to the Boy Scouts, the latest edition of the Boy Scouts handbook by this Robert Baden-Powell guy says that his idea was that the Scouts should prepare themselves to become productive citizens and strong leaders and to bring joy to other people. He wanted each scout to be ready in mind and body and to meet with a strong heart whatever challenges awaited him. And it's fascinating. I don't think I could have summarized what Jesus is asking of his disciples here any better. And we're going to see next week in the final judgment that the way that we treat other people and the things we do with the time and the assets we have will be the things that he judges us for in the end. Jesus expects productive preparation, faithful preparation. No one knows when he's going to return. So prepare by being faithful and productive now, improving his assets, serving him in his kingdom. That's what he's commanding of all of us. Please pray with me. Father, we pray, Lord, that none of us here today would be wicked, slothful, lazy servants. Father, I pray that each one of us would understand what you have done for us, the salvation that Christ came to bring to each one of us, to enable us by his Spirit, through his word, to be able to be productive citizens in his kingdom. Lord, I pray that each one of us here would hear, well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into the joy of your master. Lord, if there is anyone here who doesn't love Jesus, who isn't living, preparing productively for your return, I pray that you would save them. I pray that you would convict them, Lord, that their hearts would be changed, that they would be born again, that they would be made into good servants who double your investment in them. Father, I pray all of this in the name of our great King, our Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.